Hey everybody, welcome back to DejaVue.
It's your favorite Vue podcast. You just don't know it yet.
Exactly, and on the microphones, as almost all the time here, I'm with my wonderful co-host Michael Thiessen. Michael, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
Yeah, I'm fine too. Can't complain. And well, we always say, okay, we're Michael and Alex, and talk about our names, and maybe sometimes roughly what we're doing, but we were wondering, okay, the audience out there, maybe especially people who don't follow us for a long time, or maybe especially those people, they don't know what we're necessarily doing day to day and, well, not that much about us. So we thought, why not introducing ourselves in one episode each and going a bit deeper of like, hey, how does our daily life look like? Why did we choose Vue? Why was it still around? And why did we create that podcast in the end? And all these things. So yeah, why not getting into that, Michael, right?
Yeah, exactly. We're going to take a couple episodes to indulge in talking about ourselves, and hopefully it's interesting.
Oh, more than sure.
I'm interested to hear more about you because I feel like we've been, chatting every week, and I know like some snippets of what you've done, but like not really a whole lot. And I recall at VueConf Toronto, you were talking with someone about how you got into this, and I was overhearing part of the conversation. I was thinking, this is interesting. I don't know that much about you, and it feels weird that I don't. So I think this is a good chance to fix that.
100%. I mean, it's also like that vice versa, right? Like we have some tiny tidbits here and there throughout the episodes, but now we just like put all the puzzle pieces together and get all of that in depth. And of course, as usual, if you have any questions, then drop them in the comments or on social media. And of course, we answer them all except our social security number, PIN, and so on, so on. No mother's maiden names given here. Of course. So yeah, and of course today we start with the one only Michael Thiessen. So maybe for the general audience out there, can you describe what are you doing right now for a living?
Yeah, so right now, for the past almost 3 years now, I've been self-employed. I've been doing content creation and stuff in the Vue and Nuxt ecosystem during that time. I guess the correct term might be influencer, although I hate that term. But I do all those sorts of things. I'm on social media everywhere and creating podcasts and courses and talks and books and all of that good stuff. So yeah, I spend all my time thinking about how to teach Vue and Nuxt and how learning all the latest features and figuring all that stuff out and then giving that all to you. So that's what I've been doing the last few years.
Interesting. I mean, yeah, lots of people probably knew you from all the amazing set blog posts out there in general, the content. And you focused a lot on written content, of course, besides this podcast and some streams and, of course, some recorded talks from conferences or online conferences. So why did you decide to use the writing medium like a blog post, first of all, and didn't go like, I don't know, full into video at first place or some kind of forms of content?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I started at the end of 2018 writing on a blog in about Vue. And the reason I chose to write is because I was just more comfortable writing, and being in front of a camera was very difficult for me. And even just talking, maybe it sounds weird, although I'm sure there are some of you that can relate in that conversation as a skill is something that's took me a while to figure out. And I'm still getting better at it, but also like not like conversation with friends and family. That's like a more natural setting where it's easy to, chatting with people at a conference one-on-one. But like as soon as you get in front of a camera and you're like, okay, I gotta go from point to point to point, and I've gotta make it sound interesting, and I can't just be like monotone and boring. And, some of my first videos that I recorded were bad.
I mean, that's how you learn, right? It's like practice. Nobody like
Exactly.
Nobody was born with like, hey, I stand in front of a camera, I can just do everything straight away. That's all like, sure,
Yeah.
here and there is a bit of talent, but practice is outnumbering that anyway. I also think one important part as someone who is creating videos regularly, right, is that a blog post, I also did it around 2018, funnily as well, about Vue Nuxt still. I found them way quicker, of course, to create with like, okay, I don't know, sitting on a train, riding a train, I write a little bit and I continue that maybe at home, or like, oh, I have a thought, I'll bring that on. And then you can work on it from time to time. You can have like lots of drafts. You can just start doing that again. And all you need is, well, something to write, basically. It can even be like on physical paper. So I wonder, how is your process usually look like? Do you have like tons of drafts out there? Like, hey, I have 100 blog posts that I want to release at some point, but they're still not there yet? Or do you usually have like one at a time? How's this usually going?
Yeah, I feel like I've been very bad at my whole writing and like content creation process, which is something I'm trying to get better at, like putting more stuff out more consistently, which is something that I've liked with this podcast, that we have like a weekly time where we get together and we hit record, and so then it's like we're always putting stuff out. But generally, I have like a bunch of ideas. I kind of keep track of ideas, but oftentimes I just sit down and I think of something. And I think lots of people struggle with like this whole blank page thing where you're like, where do you even start? And I found that to get past that, it's really helpful to start with an outline. And so the outline can be literally like 3 bullet points, or it could be even more fleshed out of like, okay, I want to say these 5 things. And then for each of those, you could have sub bullet points, and maybe like you can flesh it out as much as you want or as little as you want. But really, it's like once you have all of these points, then it's pretty easy to go back and say, okay, you've got this bullet point that says, coming up with some random example like computed refs and a basic example of them. So that's your like first bullet point. It's pretty easy to write a couple sentences or a couple paragraphs and have a little code snippet for just that one point. And then you just move on to the next point. And if you take it like piece by piece by piece like that, it's actually not too difficult to get through, but you really have to break it down into these like really small chunks. If you just like look at, okay, now it's time to write an article, that's like basically an impossible task.
I also think it's really helpful to just imagine, okay, what do I actually want to write about, right? And like just even if you scratch half of the bullet points afterwards, or 99% just have one left, like write down what comes to your mind, and then in a way see what sticks, see how you connect things in a way. So you had that blog, as you said, in 2018. And now you are, for a couple of years, as you said already, basically full-time freelance content creator, educator, influencer. I know like lots of people out there have difficult times with either of the names. I think like educator is the thing that fits the most. But I also reference, for example, myself as like a content creator. It doesn't matter much in the end. We all know that. But how did you make the step from saying, okay, I write some blog posts on my blog, to being a full-time content creator? Because obviously before you had a day job, now this is your day job, so you made your let's say hobby as the day job, which also comes with other struggles and problems probably. But yeah, how did you bridge that gap?
Yeah, it's a really difficult process. And I think for most people, the stories that I've heard at least, it can be challenging to make that jump unless you are someone who has like, you start working on a YouTube channel and it like blows up, then it's like, okay, you're raking in the money over here. It's easier to switch. But most people, that's not the case. And so I started out writing a blog, and the first step really was, can I even get people to view this thing that I've made, to read the blog posts? And so I remember distinctly going to the VueConf Toronto in 2018, which I think was the first one that they had.
Where Adam Werfen was there, right? He was also there?
Yes. 2019. I'm not sure if he's at 2018. A bunch of people were at that one. And I remember looking at the Google Analytics app on my phone and being like, whoa, I had 30 people come to my website today. Like,
nice.
Just out of nothing, out of nowhere, 30 people came, and it was just like, that's insane. And so every month I was focused on publishing an article every week, and that's all that I was doing. Just an hour before work, I would work on writing. Not every day I was able to do that. Maybe some days it was 20 minutes, but I would just put out blog posts and sharing the things that I had learned and trying to answer questions. What I did, and this is a strategy that maybe doesn't work as well anymore, but I went to Stack Overflow and I looked at all the questions that were tagged with Vue, and I sorted, or I looked through, you can't really sort by views exactly on Stack Overflow, but I found a list of questions that had like the highest number of views, and I basically went through and there's usually like the article that still to this day gets the most page views from Google is how to force a component to update.
Okay. Yeah.
And so that's the one that a fifth of all my Google traffic, which is kind of wild. And I wrote it like 7 years ago. Anyway, you have a question like that, and there's like 5 different answers. One of them is the most correct answer, but then there are 4 things that are like sort of correct or useful in some other ways. Maybe some people have comments on there that are like, oh yeah, that's also a good thing to know. And so I basically took all of those things, then combined that with my own experience and understanding of the problem, and basically turned it into like a single answer that incorporated everything.
So like a more holistic view on a problem. So like, hey, here's the general way to do it, but there's some edge cases, and keep in mind that, oh, in this case, maybe you should try that first. And yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like explaining why it works. And so it's just like basically a better version of the Stack Overflow thing. So that's, I mean, some of the articles I wrote were other things that I just came up with, but that's the main thing. So eventually I got lots of traffic by doing this. And then I decided, well, okay, I've kind of figured this thing out. Now I need to start building an email list. So then I started to do that. And because I had limited time, wasn't able to focus on the blog writing thing as much. So that kind of started to slowly dwindle. But my email list started to grow. And then at some point, I decided, okay, I've got like enough people on my email list that maybe I should try seeing if I can like sell a course or something like that. Because I had sort of started this with the idea in the back of my head that, you know, if it works, then I could maybe do this. But not knowing, will it work? There's many points along the way at which it could have failed. And eventually I did get to that point where about a year and a bit after I started writing on the blog, I launched the very first course ebook that I created. And yeah, then from there, I just continued doing all of that, trying to like write blog posts and also grow my email list and also work on products in my spare time, which was like very difficult to do all of those things consistently. And so I would like say, oh no, I haven't written very much in a long time. So I would like go back to writing, and then, oh, but I need to try and make some money with some courses. So I'd go back to that, and, you know,
difficult
ping-ponging
balance.
around.
Yeah. And you did all that while still having a day job as a developer.
Yeah.
Then, okay, you said like roughly one and a half years after starting to write, then you thought, okay, we'll do the course. What was the course or like the ebook about? That's the first ever one you did.
The course I created was called Clean Components. I asked my email list. I did a little survey to ask them like, what kind of topic would you be interested in? And I came up with a few options that I was interested in myself. And this one was the most popular one, so I went with that. And it was sort of like inspired by the Clean Code book, which recently has gotten a bit more, a lot of hot takes on this one, lots of opinions on whether it's good or not. But the idea was like kind of the same of, okay, so like once you know how to write Vue, how do you do it really well? And so I wanted to share some of the patterns and things that I had learned. And the hardest part in the beginning is this like weird psychological like mind games that your brain plays with you. And I remember I would be working on this an hour a day or so, and I would say, okay, today I'm going to work on creating this course. And almost every single time, the first like 30 minutes, I had to spend just convincing myself that it was worth spending the time to work on this thing.
I see. Okay.
Because my brain was like, the whole time I'd be working on it, and I was thinking, you know what, no one actually cares. Why would anyone ever want this? What am I, like, who am I to say anything about this?
So classic imposter syndrome, basically, yeah.
Yes, but like so intense that it was like, I had to give myself like a full therapy session before I could get like even 20 minutes of work done on this thing, which is, it's kind of crazy. And, you know, thankfully I've, you know, through doing this over and over again and seeing that people actually do enjoy what I put out, they do get value from it, that has gone away, and I don't feel that in the same way anymore.
Yeah, because you also got the validation. People bought your courses, more and more people. I mean, you have like, I don't know, more than 10K newsletter subscribers at the moment. I think even like 11 or 12 or so. Don't know the exact number.
Yeah, almost 14,000.
Almost 14, yeah. See, numbers are a little bit outdated there. And I mean, people appreciate what you do, right? Be it that podcast, be it all the pieces of information you share, be it paid courses or free blog posts. So I think in a way that's, let's say, quote unquote, easiest way to like, let's say, defeat imposter syndrome, that people are like, okay, look, you get all these nice things, like people coming up at conferences telling you, hey, amazing, thanks to you, I know, land a job or understand things, or hey, we migrated a big thing thanks to your course, whatsoever. So like all these moments of impact that, of course, you wouldn't really know. No, I mean, you have a feeling they're probably there. People bought your course and said, hey, it was good. But having this real life stories of people coming into it and like, hey, this really made an impact to me, and actually saying, okay, that's another real person, not just a stranger on the internet, let's say. That must be super rewarding.
Yeah, it is. And definitely go give feedback to people, like positive feedback, because we don't get enough of it. And it is really difficult from just like a psychological perspective to constantly put stuff out there, and then inevitably you make mistakes, and someone on Twitter points it out, and they're not trying to beat you down. They're just saying, oh, this part is like slightly wrong. You're mostly right, but it's slightly wrong. But then if you're in that space where you don't have that confidence yet, I've experienced this a lot. And occasionally, if I'm having a rough day, it's easier to fall into this trap where you read that and you read it with this like negative sentiment around it. When they're just trying to like say, oh, I'm trying to be helpful, and you're interpreting it as you suck and this thing is horrible. And I've had emails where someone was like mostly positive feedback, and then like the last sentence was, but there was this thing that was kind of wrong. And the first time reading it, I literally only read that last sentence. And then when I went back like the next day to reread this email, because I couldn't deal with it at that point, because I was just like, I can't handle this. And I like leave. I come back and I reread it, and I'm like, oh wait, there's all this stuff beforehand that somehow my brain, like, it's not like I read it and then ignored it. It's like I didn't even realize that they had written this thing. My brain just like
focused on the negative things,
skipped it somehow and just went to that last. It's like the wildest thing. So,
which is also like, in a way, it's confirmation bias of like, if you have the imposter syndrome, people saying a lot of good things and something negative, like, hey, then something negative confirms my opinion that
exactly.
It's not a good idea. Yeah. But I think it's super important to give feedback on all kinds of, as long as it's constructive or positive. Ideally, like, if you have constructive criticism, I think it's super important to grow from that. So please keep that coming, especially I think in a state where two of us are right now. Like, I'm super thankful for everybody saying, hey, it's amazing. And really, as Michael, as you said, keep it coming. But of course, if you like want to improve, then you also need people saying, hey, but I don't know, this isn't explained very well because this and this, ideally because this and this is missing out, or like, hey, I don't understand that because, so like have some kind of pointers, not just like, oh yeah, actually I had a comment earlier, it's like useless. I'm like, okay, what is useless? I literally wrote an answer like, what is useless? Because if someone's like, hey, this video didn't help because you didn't point out the solution to the problem, or this blog post is great, but the main point was I came here for something totally different, so like my expectations weren't met. This is all super helpful, right? Because then you could just say, hey, I create another blog post like focusing on exactly that problem, or I also just added a little bit and saying, hey, let's update. Same with mistakes. I remember like once I wrote you DM of like, I was a code example of something like, hey, like maybe that's better idiomatically. And of course, it's also not because I want like, hey, you suck, obviously. It's more like, okay, I saw that. And I think that the tip was super helpful, but then like another example would have highlighted it better. And that's it. I think that like feedback is super crucial, but I also understand it's a lot of day form. And sometimes it's easier to take. And sometimes it's just like, okay, you know what? Whatever, I'll get back to it tomorrow.
And I did hear there's some like psychological research that if you're a beginner at something, feedback is actually not helpful. It's only once you're like more experienced that feedback is actually helpful, because you can actually incorporate it. And in the beginning, feedback can only hurt you. And I think that's probably true, that like at the beginning, just like you don't need to have comments on your website. You don't need to
No.
do any of that. You can just get good at like putting the stuff out. And once you've gotten a bunch of stuff out, then you can look for feedback and turn your comments on and deal with that.
I think the key part of the beginning is what you already mentioned earlier on is consistency. And it doesn't mean you have to do it every week of the year, but if you miss out a week, nothing will happen. Yeah, like if you don't like push out some kind of content once in a week, nobody will think, oh my God, whatever, or like will forget you. Then the week after, maybe they're like, let's say the big fans will be like, oh wait, the DejaVue podcast this week didn't really arrive. And it's Thursday evening. And then maybe it comes on Friday because, I don't know, someone was sick or it just took longer to edit, whatnot, or any kind like that. Then people are more like, okay, I want to specifically see that piece of content from my favorite creator. And I'm waiting for that, which is in a way positive, and not people like, oh yeah, well, I'll forget it. But if you say, hey, I'll do a blog post, and then a year later you do another blog post, people will not remember your name or like reference you as some kind of authoritative figure in a certain space just because you don't really show it, right? Given that's the only way of content, of course. If you say, I don't know, if you do a video once a year, it's probably fine because your main focus is written content.
Yeah, a few years ago, I specifically took a few months, I forget how long it was, maybe 1 or 2 months or 3 months, where I just didn't send anything on my newsletter because I kind of wanted to prove to myself that I didn't need to send stuff every week. And I did that and nothing happened. It's like no one said, oh, where's your emails? And like engagement didn't drop. I didn't lose all of these subscribers. Like nothing happened. Like I'm sure a couple people would have probably been like, oh, I haven't heard from that guy in a while.
Yeah, like, oh, I'm missing
and then
my
moved
tip.
on with their lives.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, exactly.
People have so much else going on in their lives. Like
That's
true. So.
No, and it's very funny. I also heard it in another podcast, finally, where someone was basically saying like, "Oh yeah, always doing over hours," and he basically did the same what you did with like a pause. He said like, "Okay, you know what? For a month, I'll just leave the office always at 6, no matter what, 6 p.m. and I'm gone, or 5, whatever." And nothing happened. As in, like, it didn't get worse or anything. It was same as before. And of course, you never knew. Oh, what does it have like skyrocketed your I don't know your output? Probably not, though. So this is also something, as you mentioned, like sometimes it's just, okay, I'm trying that. Like, why not trying that? In worst case, I can still go back to before if things don't work out. So for everyone out there doing over hours, try to leave the office earlier. In terms of over hours, though, Michael, as we are both, like, let's say self-employed, I mean, we are, how much do you work on average a day? And do you work like on the weekends? Do you have like a certain process there, or is it like, yeah, wake up whenever, right? That doesn't work anymore. But how does it?
Yeah, that's also, I think I approach work and my working hours maybe differently than some people do. A number of years ago, I read the book Deep Work by Cal Newport. And maybe it wasn't that book specifically, but there's some ideas around there of like, okay, like there are studies, how good they are, I don't know, but of people in office. And if you look at how much time they actually spend being productive, it's like 2 to 3 hours a day out of like their 8-hour time at the office. And then you look at like something I've been very interested in since I was in university is like productivity and how do you get more done and all that kind of stuff. Eventually ended up on this idea of like, okay, it's better to be focused for a longer period of time. And most people end up having like very fractured time. And so I started this new job and I forget what triggered this, but I decided to like keep a log just for like a couple weeks, every 15 minutes or so of like what I was doing with my time. And I realized that in the course of a whole 8-hour day, I spent like 2 hours, maybe 3 hours doing actual productive work. But that time was like 15 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 20 minutes here, 40 minutes there, because it was like this open office. We had like the culture at this company was very people hanging out, lots of socializing, and very like good team spirit, I guess is a good way of putting it. And so like you have people, you go get your coffee or your tea and you chat with some coworkers for a few minutes, and then someone would find some meme online and people would crowd around their desk and like check it out, or, stuff like that. And then you go for lunch and then you come back and then all this stuff, you get to work, then you've got meetings, and then you sit down to write some code, and then you get distracted with some article that you see online, and then you get back to your code, and then someone texts you, and then and like all of this stuff. It's exhausting to even like describe a hypothetical timeline of this.
Yes.
But then I sort of realized like, oh, I'm not actually working that much.
At least like
And
deep
so-
work wise. Yeah. Like meetings are still
Yeah.
work, but of course you don't get like actual features shipped there.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, of course, like meetings and communicating with your teammates and like having good relationships with them, that's all important stuff. And so basically I started to think more about my work in terms of like the actual focused time I spend doing stuff. And I got to a point where I could do like maybe 3 or 4 in a day on top of like meetings and, all the other stuff that you have to do at a job. And maybe that doesn't sound like a lot. What I've found, it's more about the quality and the focus within the time period than it is the amount of time that you spend. And so for a long time, that's what I really focused on, was like, okay, if I can spend 3 hours a day where I'm like laser focused, I'm not going down rabbit holes of like, oh, well, that code in this file looks kind of weird. Maybe I should like spend some time tweaking that or refactoring that. But like, okay, no, actually, this is what I need to be doing. Do that, and just like, yeah, just focusing on the quality of the time rather than the quantity. And that seems to have served me well so far. And so then what's interesting about working for myself now is that I don't have teammates to talk with. I don't really have meetings. And so all of that like overhead is cut out, but the amount of time that my brain can handle doing like really intense focused work like that is still like roughly the same. And now I have a baby, and so who knows how much sleep I'm gonna get in any night, and so then that makes a big difference. And so that's what I would say. That's my long-winded answer to how many hours I work in a day.
Interesting. But then like let's say, what does like an average day look like? If you say like you have these like 3-4 core focus, hyper laser focus hours of like, okay, I'll do proper qualitative work there, no phone, no social media, no, I don't know, emails and whatnot. But like, yeah, how does it start? Like, do you get up at, I don't know, 8, 6, depending, I guess, also on your baby? And then you're like, how do you fit in everything else? Like spending time with family, food, necessary things like sleep, as you just said.
Yeah. So these days, the schedule is roughly like wake up around 7-ish. And then right now we have it set up that I'm doing breakfast with my daughter. So I'll get that ready for her and breakfast for myself. And then trying to fit in time to also take my dog for a walk in the morning because she needs that.
One more thing, yeah.
And also I need like to get outside and a little bit of sunlight in the morning and stuff like that. So then maybe I get to work around 8:30 or 9, depending on how smoothly things go. And then from 8:30 to noon is basically my time to get work done. And then on Tuesdays, me and you will record our podcast from like 10 to noon. I definitely consider that part of like the focused time because, I'm not checking things or getting distracted. I'm just like focused on our conversation and what we're doing. So that's definitely like a focused work thing. And it's also like high quality time, I would say, versus like scrolling on Twitter, which is all too easy to get sucked into. Then from like noon till like 1 or 2 is lunch, my wife and daughter. And then I will take my daughter for an afternoon nap. Nice. And we've got like this carrier. She fit in like in the front. I have a standing desk here, and so I can have her for a nap while I can get a little bit of work done. And so another thing that I've figured out over time is like figuring out my energy levels throughout the day. So like depending on if you're like a morning person or an evening person, I'm definitely a morning person. So that's why I try and like front load my day as much as I can. But for me, like that early to mid afternoon time is harder to focus. And also when I'm, I've got a baby strapped to my chest, it's harder to focus on things.
That's true.
So I usually do like email and, if I've got to do some customer support or do some taxes or like other like random little tasks that don't require like a lot of concentration but still need to get done. Those are the things that I'll do in the afternoon then.
Interesting. Yeah, but it sounds, I mean, kind of like a normal quote unquote work day with like, okay, you have your focus hours, you have things to do. Obviously you fill your afternoons with like more, let's say casual quote unquote tasks, which are also still important. I mean, you have to run a business after all. Now, one thing that just came to my mind about the previous part where we talked about your transition. I mean, it kind of goes into that now when you're like, okay, how is your day looking as a full-time content creator? Did you, if you want to share this, of course, with our dear DejaVue listeners, did you had like a breaking point where you said, okay, look, if my side business that was back then, if that like reaches a certain amount of money per month, like a classic like MMR or ARR, it's like, okay, this is the time where I want to switch? Or was it more like a feeling? Like, how did you approach that switch there?
Yeah, so it's difficult. I'll just say that again because I spent probably, I don't know, like 2 or 3 years leading up to that, just always constantly thinking about, okay, how could I make this jump? Like, what would I need to get there? What would my business have to look like in order to make that happen? And like trying to think, okay, if I spend an hour a day on this now, if I went full time, that would be more time. Do I factor that in or do I just like not factor that in? I don't think it was as much a certain amount of money per month because the business doesn't make, it's not like a consistent cash flow because of like course launches and things like that. So it was more about, I'm just trying to remember what we did. It was like I had earned a bunch of money slowly over a previous number of years with the business, and I kept it in the business bank account because I wanted to build up like a cash buffer so that when I did go full time, I would have like this buffer that, if things went poorly or if it took a while to ramp things up, we would still be okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very reasonable.
And so building that up and also building up my email list and seeing like, okay, my course launches and things like that are doing better. And I think that if I continue to do this, then there's a good chance that I'll be able to make it work. And then there's, backup plans like, oh, I could do freelancing or writing articles for other blogs or, stuff like that.
Nice. So yeah, basically, okay, having some savings and then at a feeling where like, okay, this enough people on the list.
Yeah.
This is like, let's say projection rule of thumb wise, that could work out basically.
It was really like a feelings based kind of thing. I think I was really trying to figure out like, is there a way that I can know that this is going to work? And maybe that's part of my personality as well of like, I like to have some certainty in things, but with business especially, I've learned that there is never any certainty. You can have confidence in things, but it's always like some amount of uncertainty of like, even this podcast, we put in a bunch of work. Who knows if people would like it? And now it's like, okay, people seem to like it, but like, where is it going in the future? Is it, you may not know this, but we don't make any money from this, but it costs us money to produce and do this. And so it's like, okay, is this worth all the time and money that we're putting into it beyond just like talking to cool people? And so we have to kind of just go with our gut at some point and hope that it works and go from there. And that's part of why we needed the cash, because it's like if you have some money in the bank account, then it's okay. And I was pretty confident that if I needed to, I could find a job as a software developer somewhere else if things went bad.
yeah, like in a couple months or so, it's like 1-2 months, like, okay, then at least the cash flow is going again. Yeah, no, it makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you mentioned, like you have always uncertainty. Of course, there's also likelihood to say like, okay, I don't know if this course sale will go that well and I can like create something that is similar and so on and so on. But yeah, you never have full certainty. Of course, then it's also about, and that kind of brings me to the podcast as well, like figuring out, okay, how to monetize things. You found your way, for example, for courses to say, hey, I put so much content out for free. And for like, let's say premium material with like screencasts, with exercises, with Q&A sessions, then sure, you can have all that. Basically a lot of knowledge on top of what you have out there right now, but also in a structured and compact form. Yeah. So that's also, I think, a big value there. And there are a lot of ways to do that, right? Like other people try this through advertisements, through like sponsorships and so on and so on. And I mean, same for a podcast in the end. But it's also something where we see, I hope, a few changes this year in DejaVue. That's probably for another episode. I think it's a good point to maybe take a look at what you did before you started your blog in 2018, mainly because nobody starts as a freelancer necessarily. I mean, sure, you can have like a side business on the side, as the name says, but nobody's like, okay, you know what? I finished whatever high school and I start out there as a freelance developer because, well, you have to learn development, like you have to learn programming. You have to get into all of that. So how was that for you? How was your way of like learning the skills, getting into web dev, getting into Vue.js, and sticking with it?
Yeah, it took me a while to find my way into software development. So I think there's like a lot of stories of people who were like coding at age of 3 and maybe not that young, but like it was like, okay, it's pretty obvious that this is what you're going to do with your life. But for me, it was like I had one of my older cousins who was like graduated high school during the .com boom, and so he like launched his programming career. And he showed me when I was like, I don't know, 8 years old or something, that you could just like open up a text editor and save this file as a .html file. You could open it in your web browser. And I was like, whoa, that's pretty neat. But then like through most of my younger years, I was actually just focused on music. And that was what really defined me and my life. And in high school, I was in a rock band with some of my friends, and we like recorded and produced our own music. And then I went on and did some EDM production. And so like I was mostly like, nice. I'm doing music, and programming was not in the picture at all. And so then after high school, I forget exactly how it happened, but like I wasn't planning on going to university at all. But like a week before, I somehow found myself at the university because my friend was going to, I don't know, check out where their classes were going to be or something like that. And I ended up applying and getting in like a week beforehand.
Oh.
So this is like a local university, so it's not like, ultra competitive or anything.
It's not Harvard, sure, but still, I mean, they probably had some open slots, but I don't know how it works in Canada. Like in Germany, for example, you had to like have at least a certain result in your final exams and all that. So it's depending on what you want to study, not that easy as well.
Yeah, so I was lucky; my grades were good enough. The whole process is kind of hazy because it just happened so fast, I think. So.
It's also been a little bit. It wasn't like last year. So yeah.
Yeah, true. And so I started in business. When I was in grade 12, I got super excited about business and like, I'm going to start a business. I'm going to, the next startup, that's going to be me. And so then I started this, and like 2 weeks in, I was like, okay, business is not for me. I hate this. And I don't know how other universities do this, obviously, but so I had to take like economics, and I also had to take, I think it was calculus, but it was calculus for business. Mm-hmm, so it was like a different version of calculus. They had a couple other math courses that were like for business. And there was something about it that I didn't like. Some of the other courses I had to take were just, I don't know, it just didn't work for me. So very quickly I figured this out, and I was like, okay, the other two options then are mathematics that I could go into, or computer science, because I had sort of been interested in programming. I did a little bit like throughout my years, so I kind of had like, I knew what an if statement was, I knew what a loop was, but hadn't really made anything interesting. So those are my two options. And so yeah, I ended up going into computer science, and that's basically how I got into the whole world of software, through a very meandering process.
I mean, you got in touch with it very early, and somehow like a boomerang and came back.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm still curious if you have some links for your produced and recorded music, be it rock or EDM, also for our listeners. If there's
Yeah,
still
I could
something
probably
like
find some stuff.
yeah, put it on. We put it in the show notes. I will not forget about that. I'll ping you. So okay, then you started a computer science degree, and I guess you learned what in university, Java.
Yeah, so it was part computer science, part software engineering, because there weren't enough people to do like two separate degrees, so they're kind of like combined.
What would the difference will like be in between computer science and software engineering in your university?
So for some context, where I live now is in Waterloo, and the University of Waterloo has two separate degrees. One is computer science, which is a sub-discipline in mathematics, and then there's software engineering, which is a sub, I think, of engineering.
Yeah.
So software engineering is like focused on, okay, how do you actually build stuff with software? Let's talk about databases and, web development and all this sort of stuff. I don't know exactly what they end up teaching there, but computer science is, I mean, for many of you who aren't familiar with computer science, it's basically math and has nothing to do with science. I don't know how it got called science, but
Math is
it's
science too. So
yeah, it doesn't feel like a science.
Discussion for another time, I guess.
It's mathematics, and what took me a few years to realize is that it's not actually so much about computers as it is about information. So I would describe computer science more as like the mathematics of information. So you can talk about cryptography, and you can say mathematically how much information is in this string or these sequence of bits and bytes.
Like the
how much
entropy of
information is. Yeah, exactly. And so then you can say, oh, well, if we encrypt it, we can do things, we can play with this entropy to like make it secure or less secure. And then other things like analyzing algorithms and sorting and stuff like that, which if you learn some computer science, you realize that sorting algorithms work outside of computers. You can sort anything with these algorithms. And like,
do you know there's this video of a dance for a sorting algorithm? I'm not sure if you've seen it. Like when I went to university, it was also like, yeah, they shown that sorting algorithm as like a more like traditional dance. It was a lot of fun.
The bubble sort dance.
I think it wasn't bubble sort. That would be fun, though. But I'll link it. I'll find and link it.
Yeah, that's interesting. There are a lot of things that I think about. Like one thing I remember learning about was like this trade-off with algorithms where we trade off between time and space. And so one example I often tell people about is like, oh, when you go to a parking lot, if the parking lot is like basically full, so they've like minimized the amount of space you need, then that one spot that's left, it's going to take you a really long time to find it. So you're optimizing for space at the expense of time. But if on the other hand, your parking lot was like 10 times bigger than it ever needed to be, well, then finding a spot is really easy, but you're using way more space than you need. And so there's like a lot of areas in life where you can find like these computer sciencey things that kind of work their way in there.
That's a nice analogy. Yeah, I like that. And then you did your computer science / software engineering degree then?
Yeah.
So you have both, or how did that work?
Well, it's officially a computer science degree, but they threw in like some software engineering stuff. So like I learned some different programming languages and like databases and other object-oriented programming with Ruby, stuff like that.
Oh, you had Ruby in university. That's nice. That's great.
Yeah.
And which other languages did you touch on? Did you have like Haskell or like Lisp or any?
So we did C,
Mm-hmm.
so we could learn about pointers and that kind of stuff. We did one class that was focused more on like the CPU and how that works. So then we did some assembly for that.
Nice.
And then we did Ruby for object-oriented programming. And most of the other coursework was Java. So we could like learn how to build stuff with databases and things like that.
Yeah.
I did one course on programming languages, which covered Lisp. And I forget, there were a few different other like weird kind of obscure things.
Like Prolog, where like it's like a reasoning based or like.
We did, yeah, I did Prolog in an AI course,
Really
which
interesting.
it was very interesting. So yeah, I mean, we're going to link to all of these things in the show notes.
Exactly.
And there's some interesting programming languages out there that are like challenge the way that you think about how to solve problems and stuff. But yeah, very interesting.
Lisp, for example, also like putting Haskell in there, like the functional programming, like true functional programming.
Yeah.
It really blew my mind when I did it the first time. Definitely.
Yeah.
So okay, you learned different languages, and you always said like in a way it was more about the mathematical, like say academic part as well, besides the software engineering bits and pieces. And then I guess you graduated at some point.
Yeah. So in the university I went to, we had this, they call it a co-op program, which is basically you do, in the second half, you do a couple internships at different companies. So by the time you graduate, you've had, I don't know, it's like about a year of actual experience. What happened to me is that on my first one, I ended up moving from Winnipeg, or near Winnipeg, which is like the dead center of Canada. And I moved out to Waterloo, which is right near Toronto. And Waterloo is like the tech hub of Canada, mostly because Research in Motion or BlackBerry was here first, and then they, laid off a bunch of people who went to start other startups, etc. And so it's got like a big history of startups and startup culture and all that kind of stuff. So I ended up coming out here for that first internship, and then I met the woman who is now my wife. And so suddenly I no longer wanted to be in Winnipeg anymore and found my way back to Waterloo to finish my degree, and the rest is history. I'm here now.
So that's a good point. Like, what happened between what is that sad history you mentioned? Like, you probably got a job somewhere. Did like one of the co-ops help there, or they were just like, okay, hey, I'm done. I have some experience. Give me work. How did that work?
Yeah, so I went around trying to find a job once I graduated. I didn't attend my like final ceremony because I would have to fly back and forth. So I didn't actually get my degree until like a year later. So I was always just like, I think I graduated, but I'm not like 100% sure.
I don't have a paper saying it. So yeah.
Yeah, so something got messed up in the mail. And so eventually I got it. But yeah, I remember going to a networking session for like startups and stuff like that. And as I was walking in, this one guy was like, "Oh, hey, Michael." And I was like, I don't know who this guy is. And it turns out it was the guy who interviewed me for that very first internship, somehow recognized me like a year later and was like, "Hey, I'll introduce you to some people." So then he introduced me to some people, and then I ended up getting a job at this cybersecurity company called Eason Tire.
Fun.
Yeah.
So you did cybersecurity then?
Well, my job was effectively taking spreadsheets and turning them into web apps with like authentication on them.
I see. Okay. So you basically made the groundwork so the cybersecurity researchers could do their work even more efficient.
Yeah, basically.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
So you basically stayed with web development the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But how did that come? Like, why did you decide to go for web development? Was that like also related to what you were shown when you were 8 years old with like, hey, you can just like put the HTML thing out there and go for it? Or like, did you just enjoy Rails so much?
Yeah, I don't actually know. I started, with that HTML file. And I remember in high school trying to check out this like new jQuery thing. I didn't get very far with it, but I do remember going to their website and looking around. I don't know why JavaScript. I don't know. That's where I ended up.
A fair point. Okay, and then I guess you continued using, well, of course, web technologies, and then still Ruby on Rails, like Ruby, or?
Yeah, so my first job was it was 2015, 10 years ago, and React had just come out. And so we were starting to use React for that. And I remember the very first apps that we made were like 3 React components, and they were just giant, messy things because we hadn't yet figured out. I think even like the community hadn't yet figured out how to do it in a good way. It wasn't really like common knowledge yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do remember that. And slowly figuring out how to make it better, how to use Redux and, all that kind of stuff.
So you got in touch with React then, but obviously you're not using React anymore. So what
I'm
made
not.
the switch from React to Vue? When did you get in touch with Vue? And
Yeah, so I wanted to work in a company where instead of building like internal tools where, let's face it, for an internal tool, the UI doesn't really matter. As long as it's usable, that's what counts. And I wanted to do something a bit more than that. So I ended up getting a job at a startup that was a product company where the UI really matters. So I started that job in, I think, 2017.
yeah.
And they decided that they were like right before I joined, they had decided, oh, we're going to rewrite everything like from our jQuery thing into Vue. And so I arrived right
Okay.
as they were making that transition. And so I started to use Vue, somehow became the person most knowledgeable about Vue in the company. And so then people started asking me questions, and then I started blogging about it. Eventually, people started to independently discover my blog posts and they're like, "Wait, is this you? What?" And then so that was kind of fun.
So like Googling the same problems and then like, hey, this guy's the solution. Oh, wait.
Yeah, and then they look at the top and be like, "Wait," and that's you. So
Great.
yeah, that was fun.
Sweet. And yeah, then as you said, for real, the rest is history, so to say.
Yeah.
Amazing. And I wonder, maybe like in a very like short summary, how did you come up with public speaking? Like to do that?
So I started in 2018. I gave a lightning talk at VueConf Toronto.
At the very first.
Yeah, it was this weird thing on writing components, but only using slots and scope slots and like not using the script tag
Oh, I see.
as much as possible. So it was
Yeah.
like this weird, like experimental kind of, I don't know where I got the idea for this, but I just started to try it. Yeah. Anyways, I gave that talk and people loved it. I enjoyed doing it. And then the next year I was able to give like a full length talk at the conference. And then I've been giving a talk there almost every year since when they've had the in-person ones.
Sweet. Yeah, I mean, it's also like great
Yeah.
to have a conference that's right in your backyard, as
Yeah.
you said previously.
For sure.
So that's really helpful. Nice. I think we're almost about to wrap up here. I would do a little quick fire with you if you want to, just like some
Sure.
very quick questions. So if you weren't a developer at all, what kind of career would you possibly pursue?
Oh man, if I switched now, I think I might start a bakery and do like sourdough. Like, yeah, that's what I would do.
That's cool. One day I want to try a sourdough bread or some kind of pastry of you. I would love that. What do you say is your like favorite non-technical hobby? Like still music?
I don't do as much music now. I sort of like I have an acoustic guitar in the living room. I kind of pick it up every once in a while and just kind of mess around with that. But I would say, I don't know, I like to read mostly like nonfiction, all sorts of different things like that. And lately I haven't had that much time for hobbies between work and family stuff. But yeah, baking and reading.
That's good. That's nice. Yeah, I haven't read a proper book in a while. Like also time and so many things around. If you could choose one developer out there to like collaborate in any way, who would it be, and what would you collaborate on?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
This is not a quickfire one.
It's not. It's not. Maybe it's a slower quick fire. Yeah.
I'm going to say Maybe because it's trending, maybe not. But I've been very interested in AI for the last, 2 and a bit years since ChatGPT. So maybe what I would want to work on is something AI related. I think it would be fun. I know Daniel Rowe has also been doing some AI stuff. So maybe some sort of like something at the intersection of Nuxt and AI. I think that might be interesting.
Cool. Yeah, that's a nice pick. Fun. Who knows? Maybe there's something happening. I know, like the one project, I think it was called Unsight, where he's like classifying all the issues. That's at least open source, and I think he doesn't use AI. He uses, I think, some kind of clustering algorithm. But yeah, maybe something like that could be fun.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last thing, Michael, where can people follow you?
Oh, you can follow me on X, on Blue Sky. I have my website, michaelnthiessen.com. And you can Google Michael Vue, and I think you'll probably find me. There's also Michael Hoffman. So
Shout out. Yeah.
shout out to you, Michael. And yeah, that's it, I think. You can sign up for my newsletter. I send out weekly tips and like articles and other stuff. And one thing we didn't mention in this is that I'm also the instructor for Mastering Nuxt, which is getting a big refresh and overhaul. Like as we speak, I'm working on it right now. So don't know yet the timeline for that, but yeah,
it will happen
sometime soon.
Mastering Nuxt 4. Yeah, looking forward to that. Michael, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's not like you're here every time anyway, but this time as more guest role. So
yeah, it's nice to just answer questions and not have to like think about the next question to ask. And
that's true.
Like, all
that's true. And I mean, I hope we'll have you back on, obviously.
I hope to come back sometime soon.
Yeah, we'll make it happen. If you have any questions left, Michael will answer all of them in the comments or on social media, except, as we said, nobody's made names, no pins or anything. But yeah, we all know what your favorite framework is, so that's not a question there. And I would say, if you haven't seen the last episodes, like before that, definitely checked it out. Really good ones out there about like predictions, 2024, 2025, even better ones out there before. And if this isn't the latest episode, then quick, jump over. Until next time, see you soon, folks.